I never thought betrayal would come from the people I trusted the most. Betrayal has a strange way of arriving. It doesn't knock on the door, it doesn't warn you in advance. It creeps in quietly, wearing the face of someone you love, someone you would never suspect, until suddenly the truth shatters the world you thought was safe. That night began like any other. The city lights shimmered outside my window, and the air was heavy with the smell of rain. I was sitting in the kitchen sipping tea, letting the silence wrap around me after a long day. But even as the rain tapped gently against the glass, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It was an instinct I couldn't explain, a whisper in the back of my mind telling me to stay awake, to pay attention, and then it happened. I overheard voices, muffled, low, coming from the living room. At first, I thought it was the television, but the sound carried a sharpness, a tone of urgency that didn't belong to any show. I crept closer, careful with each step, my heart pounding like a drum. What I heard next froze me in place. They'll never know. By the time they find out, it will all be too late. The voice was unmistakable. It was someone close to me, someone who had shared dinners at this very table, someone I had trusted with secrets of my own life. And yet here they were, plotting, planning, betraying. I pressed my hand to my mouth to stifle the gasp threatening to escape. My chest burned, my throat ached, but I couldn't move, I couldn't breathe. Every word from their lips was like a dagger pushed deeper into my heart. It wasn't just betrayal, it was calculation, cold, heartless. They spoke of things I never imagined, plans that would strip me of everything I held dear, lies they had told right to my face, and worst of all, the laughter that followed. That laughter, cruel and mocking, echoed through my bones, reminding me that trust, once broken, can never be repaired. I wanted to storm into the room, to demand answers, to shout until their mask fell off, but something inside me told me to wait, to listen, to let the truth reveal itself fully before I confronted it. So I stood in the shadows, an unwilling witness to my own undoing. As they continued, I pieced together the fragments of their betrayal, the stolen opportunities, the whispers behind my back, the secret alliances that had been forming while I was blind with trust. Every detail carved another scar into my soul, and yet, in that same moment of devastation, I felt something else awaken inside me: suspense. Because betrayal doesn't just hurt, it transforms. It pushes you past the edge of innocence and plants a seed of something darker. And as the storm outside rumbled louder, I realized that the very person who had betrayed me would soon face a storm of their own. Karma has a way of working silently, much like betrayal itself. It doesn't announce its arrival, it waits, it watches, and when the time is right, it delivers its blow with devastating precision. I retreated to my room, the sound of their laughter still burning in my ears. My hands trembled as I closed the door, and for a long moment I simply stared into the darkness. How could they? I whispered to myself. After everything? But the darkness didn't answer, it only listened, and in that silence, a thought took root. Betrayal may have broken me tonight, but it would not destroy me. The wheel of fate was already turning, and sooner than they realized, they would be the ones gasping for air, caught in the trap of their own lies. I didn't need to seek revenge. Life has a way of balancing itself. I only had to wait and watch as their actions came crashing down upon them. That night, as the rain poured harder, I understood something profound. The people who hurt us often write their own downfall with the same hand they used to stab us in the back. The betrayal had cut me deeply, yes, but it had also awakened me, and though they didn't know it yet, their reckoning was coming. The silence after betrayal is heavier than any storm. It lingers, it suffocates, and it reminds you that nothing will ever be the same again. But silence also carries consequences, and soon the betrayer would learn that every choice comes with a price. The night after the betrayal felt endless. I lay in bed, my body heavy with exhaustion, but my mind refusing to rest. Sleep eluded me, slipping further away every time I closed my eyes. All I could hear was the echo of their laughter, cruel and mocking, the sound replaying in my head like a broken record. The house was quiet, but it wasn't the peaceful quiet I once cherished. It was a suffocating silence, thick with the weight of what I now knew. Every creak of the floor, every hum of the refrigerator, every faint tick of the clock seemed louder, sharper, almost unbearable. The silence wasn't empty. It was alive, pressing against me, forcing me to relive the betrayal over and over. I had always thought silence meant safety. that in silence I could rest, heal, and find peace. But now, silence was a reminder of everything I had lost. It was the sound of trust shattered, of innocence ripped away, of love turned into poison. In the days that followed, I moved through life in a haze. At work, I smiled politely, nodding at conversations I wasn't truly listening to. My friends asked if I was okay, and I told them I was fine, though my voice cracked every time I said it. Inside, I wasn't fine. I was broken. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw their faces. Faces that had once been familiar, comforting, trusted. Now they were twisted, unfamiliar, strangers wearing masks I had been too blind to see through. The silence between us was deafening. We still spoke, of course. Little things, small talk, the kind of words that fill empty rooms but mean nothing. But behind every word was a silence so loud it drowned out everything else. They knew I knew. And I knew they were waiting for me to break. The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't end with the act itself. It lingers, casting a shadow that stretches into every corner of your life. You begin to wonder when the next blow will fall, when the next secret will come to light. I began to notice little things, messages on their phone they hid quickly, late nights explained with weak excuses, nervous glances when they thought I wasn't looking. Each detail was small, insignificant on its own, but together they painted a picture of guilt so clear it was undeniable. And yet, they carried on as if nothing had happened, as if their lies hadn't left scars across my heart. That was the most unbearable part, the arrogance, the belief that their betrayal would remain hidden forever. But secrets like silence cannot last. Eventually both break. At night I would sit by the window, staring out into the dark, feeling the weight of it all pressing down on me. Sometimes tears would come, hot and relentless, carving rivers down my cheeks. Other times I would feel nothing at all, just emptiness, a hollow space where my trust used to live. It was in those moments of silence that my emotions became the loudest. Rage, grief, heartbreak, confusion, they all screamed inside me, demanding to be heard. But I swallowed them down, letting the silence consume me because I knew something they didn't. Karma was listening, and karma has a way of turning silence into justice. The silence stretched for weeks, growing heavier with each passing day. And in that silence I began to notice the first cracks forming in their lives. They grew restless, irritable, snapping at small things. Opportunities they had bragged about suddenly slipped away. Friends who once trusted them began to distance themselves, suspicious of the lies they had told. Slowly, almost invisibly, their world began to unravel, and though I said nothing, I watched. Every loss they faced was like a whisper from the universe, a reminder that actions always have consequences. Betrayal doesn't come without a price, and they were beginning to pay it. But this was only the beginning. The silence of consequences was still building, gathering strength like a storm on the horizon. I remember one evening, weeks after that night of betrayal, when I saw them sitting alone. Their face was pale, their eyes heavy with something they couldn't hide anymore, fear. They looked over at me, searching my expression, as if trying to read whether I knew, whether I would ever confront them. I held their gaze, calm and unyielding. I didn't need to say a word. The silence between us spoke louder than anything I could ever shout, and in that silence they broke. Their hands trembled, their voice cracked. They stumbled over excuses, apologies half-formed, lies tangled with fragments of truth. Watching them struggle was like watching karma in motion, unraveling the web they had spun so carefully. That was when I realized the power of silence. It wasn't just emptiness, it was a mirror that forced them to see themselves, to face the truth they had tried to bury. The heavy silence of consequences wasn't my punishment, it was theirs, and deep inside I knew the storm had only just begun. When betrayal plants its seed, consequences grow slowly, quietly, until the weight of them becomes unbearable. But soon, silence gives way to signs, subtle at first, undeniable later. The universe begins to show that justice cannot be avoided, and karma always finds its way. Karma is patient, it doesn't rush, it doesn't need to. It waits in silence, watching, listening, allowing the guilty to believe they've escaped. And then, when they least expect it, karma takes its first step. Quiet, deliberate, unstoppable, that's how it began. At first I thought the universe had gone silent after the betrayal. Days passed, heavy with the weight of broken trust, and I wondered if justice would ever arrive. But slowly, almost invisibly, the signs began to appear. The first sign was small, almost laughable. They had been bragging for weeks about a new opportunity, one they claimed would change everything. I remember the arrogance in their smile, the way they spoke as if the world itself bent to their will. And then, on an ordinary morning, the phone rang. I watched their expression as they answered. The confidence drained from their face. Their voice cracked, and then they whispered words I'll never forget. They're backing out. The signs of karma had begun to show. Small, quiet, but undeniable, and soon those signs would grow into something much bigger. Because hidden secrets never stay hidden forever, and the past always comes back to collect its debt. There comes a moment when silence is no longer enough, when watching from the shadows is no longer satisfying, when the weight of betrayal demands confrontation. That moment had arrived. For weeks I had watched karma weave its web around them. The cracks in their perfect life were widening, the mask they wore was slipping. They had begun to stumble, to falter, to lose the control they cherished so much. And though I had found a quiet satisfaction in watching it unfold, there was still something unfinished. The silence between us had grown unbearable. Every look, every word, every forced smile carried the heavy reminder of what had been done. The air itself seemed poisoned with unspoken truth. And deep down, I knew the confrontation was inevitable. It happened on a stormy evening. Rain pounded against the windows, thunder rumbled in the distance, and inside the house the tension was thicker than the air before lightning strikes. They sat across from me, avoiding my eyes, their hands restless, drumming nervously against the table. I had seen this before, nervousness disguised as calm, but tonight the disguise was too thin to hide behind. I set the torn photograph and the ledger of lies between us, not literally, but in spirit. The truth sat there, invisible yet undeniable, burning in the silence. Finally, I spoke. My voice was steady, though my heart raced. Why? The word cut through the air like a blade, simple but impossible to escape. They froze. For the first time, I saw fear flicker across their face. They opened their mouth, then closed it, as if the truth itself was too heavy to carry. Why did you betray me? At first, they tried to laugh it off. You're imagining things, they said, their voice brittle, forced. But I didn't move. I didn't blink. I just watched silently as the cracks deepened. Their words faltered. Their smile faded. They tried again, this time softer, almost pleading. It wasn't like that. You don't understand. But I did understand. I had understood from the very moment I heard their voice whispering in the dark, from the moment the laughter echoed in my ears. I leaned forward, my voice sharper now. Don't lie to me anymore. I know what you did. I know everything. Their eyes darted away, searching for escape, for an excuse, for anything that could save them from the truth. But there was no escape. The silence that followed was louder than any scream, and then it happened. Their shoulders slumped, their hands trembled, their voice cracked as they whispered, I didn't mean for it to happen this way. Tears welled in their eyes, but I felt no sympathy. Every tear was just another proof of guilt, another reminder of the wound they had carved into my soul. They confessed in fragments, bits and pieces of the truth, each one sharper than the last. The betrayal had been deliberate, the choices had been selfish, and though they tried to soften the edges, to paint themselves as a victim of circumstance, the reality was undeniable. They had betrayed me, and nothing would ever change that. My voice rose, heavy with pain and anger. Do you realize what you've done? Do you realize what you've destroyed? They flinched at every word, as if each syllable struck them like a blow. And maybe it did, because the truth hurts more than any weapon. I told them about the sleepless nights, the broken trust, the silence that had suffocated me since that day. I told them how their laughter had burned into my memory, how their lies had hollowed me out. By the time I finished, tears were streaming down my face, not tears of weakness, but of release. They sat there, broken, unable to respond, and that's when I saw it, the realization dawning in their eyes. They understood now, not just the weight of my pain, but the weight of what awaited them. The cracks in their life weren't coincidences, the losses weren't accidents, it was karma, and it wasn't finished. The confrontation ended not with shouting, not with violence, but with silence. A silence so heavy, so final, it left no room for repair. I stood, my tears drying on my cheeks, my voice calm once again. You made your choice, now you live with it. And I walked away, leaving them alone with the consequences. Because that's the cruel beauty of betrayal. The betrayer always believes they can control the outcome, but in the end, control slips away, and what remains is the inescapable truth that every action has a price. That night, as the storm raged outside, I felt something shift inside me. The weight I had carried for so long was lighter now, replaced by something stronger. Not revenge, not anger, but peace. Because I knew karma was still watching, still waiting, still writing the next chapter of justice. The confrontation had ended, but karma's work was far from over. The betrayer had felt the sting of truth, but destiny still had one final act to deliver, and when it came, it would be a blow they would never recover from. There is always a final act, a moment when everything that has been hidden, everything that has been denied, finally comes crashing down. Betrayal may start in whispers and lies, but it never ends quietly. It ends in collapse, and when collapse comes, it is devastating. After the confrontation, silence returned to my life. But this silence was different. It wasn't heavy with unanswered questions or suffocating with the weight of lies. It was the silence of clarity. I had faced them, I had spoken the truth, and I had left them alone with the burden of their choices. I thought perhaps that was the end of it, that the pain would slowly fade, that life would settle into something resembling peace. But karma had not finished its work. It began slowly, as it always does. At first, small inconveniences became bigger setbacks. The friends who once stood by them no longer returned their calls. The opportunities they chased fell apart at the last moment. Their lies, once polished and convincing, were now transparent. Everyone could see through them, and the trust they had enjoyed for so long had evaporated. They tried to hold it together, tried to maintain the facade, but day by day it slipped further from their grasp. And then the blow came. Not from me, not from anger, but from life itself. I heard about it before I saw it. A quiet rumor, spreading like wildfire, whispered behind closed doors, murmured among the very people they had once manipulated. The truth of their betrayal, the details they thought they had buried forever, had surfaced. Not in fragments, not in subtle hints, but in full, undeniable exposure. Every secret they had tried to hide was dragged into the light for all to see. The humiliation was complete. I saw them once after the truth had spread. Their shoulders hunched, their eyes hollow, their face a mask of exhaustion and defeat. The arrogance that had once defined them was gone. The laughter that had mocked me in the dark was silenced. They were surrounded by the ruins of everything they had built, and there was no one left to shield them. The world they had created through lies and betrayal had crumbled, and they were standing in the rubble, powerless to stop it. I didn't feel joy when I saw them like that. I didn't feel triumph or revenge. What I felt was something deeper, closure. The weight I had carried for so long was gone, not because I had destroyed them, but because they had destroyed themselves. Karma had delivered its final blow, and it was far more devastating than anything I could have imagined. That is the truth of betrayal. The betrayer always believes they are untouchable, that their lies will protect them, that their actions will go unpunished, but life has a way of balancing the scales, and when it does, the punishment is not just fair, it is inevitable. Standing there, watching them fade into the consequences of their own choices, I realized something important. Betrayal doesn't define the betrayed, it defines the betrayer. And while the scars remain, while the pain may never fully vanish, the final chapter always belongs to karma, and karma never forgets. And now I ask you, if you had been in my place, watching betrayal unfold, carrying the weight of silence, and then seeing karma finally strike, what would you have done? Would you have confronted sooner, or would you have let life take its course? Share your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear your perspective. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another story filled with suspense, betrayal, and the power of karma. Because remember, every action writes its own ending.